are you still selling using the old model of selling, or are you using the new model of selling? And like, to us, that makes complete sense. But to a lot of people, they're like, well, what do you mean? What's the old model? What's the new model? Like, what does that all mean? So, Matt, I've got to ask you this question, because before you were the CEO, you were a client a couple years, 2.5 years ago.
Yeah.
In your mind, when you started hearing like old model versus new model, what was going through your mind when you started hearing that lingo? Because not a lot of people say that.
Yeah, well, I think like for me, it was about transitioning from the old beat 'em up, prospects are idiots, buyers are liars. It's just a numbers game. Those are really sort of the core tenets of what I felt like. Because when I was selling, and I was good at it, I was a successful sales rep. I was a 6-figure sales rep. But I was not getting referrals. I was not getting any follow-up sales. It was buy or die. And I was just in the proverbial boxing match every single day.
Yeah.
I actually did a podcast with a guy yesterday who came from the same sort of school of selling that I did. And we were talking about how damaging it was to us in terms of like, not only like we can do way better now because our skills are better because we do sell in a better methodology, but from a personal standpoint, it's difficult to always be that very difficult, hard-nosed, just hyper challenging individual.
Why is it difficult emotionally for a salesperson to sell that way?
Well, I'll tell you what the real problem was I was selling full-time. It's my full-time job, 8 hours a day selling. And I had to put on like a persona of like buy or die. Sorry, excuse the vernacular, you're a piece of shit if you don't move forward. And that's sort of what was drilled into me.
Yeah.
And so like, I hated the prospect if they didn't move forward. Like I just was like, like that.
So you took it personal.
Yeah. And then to separate that and then go into dad mode or husband mode. I remember my wife talking to me going like, hey, you're kind of an asshole. I was like, what? She's like, I was like, stop trying to sell me stuff. Like, and I was like, oh, and it just creeps into your personality.
Right.
And then when I kind of transitioned to the new era, like I started working on my communication skills and I started being more neutral and leaning out a little bit so the prospects would lean in and just sort of like having this much better back and forth and much more productive conversations, which once I figured out how to do it, like the results just skyrocketed, but also our communication with my family, my friends, and my children was 10 times better.
Yeah. So you learned how to use human behavior to get your prospects to pull you in rather than you trying to push them forward. I mean, in an overview of the difference between the old model, new model, that's really it. Old model, pushing, chase, right?
Yeah.
Convince, buy or die, right? Selling is adversarial. It's you against the prospect trying to win them over so you can make money. That's really what the old model is taught, right? Compared to the new model is learning how to work with human behavior, learning the right questions, coming across more neutral, unbiased, and detached that get your prospect to want to engage, to want to open up to you and actually pull you in, right? That's really the difference between the old model versus the new model. The new model is collaborative. It's you working with the prospect to help them find and solve problems. And you're working as a team where they feel that from you. So because of that, it builds massive internal trust and internal urgency that they want to take action and solve their problem now and get what they want. And they want to do that with you because no salesperson has ever caused them to feel that way.
Exactly. I was talking to one of I was doing a training for our NEPQ 3.0 guys, which are the guys who are they're coming up in our training and they're learning about advanced tonality and objection handling, all that kind of stuff. And I said, listen, the difference is that the old way of selling is pressure, and pressure is an outside force acting on it, right? Now, there's the internal pressure, but for this purposes is like you're pushing. Yeah. Whereas like good selling is tension based. Yeah. So it's like, it's internal. And it's like on one side, it's the need to move forward. So it's like, this is the solution, twisting this way, and then twisting the other way is the consequence. And it's that act of like that inside that the person has to fix that.
Yeah.
Like you're creating their choice.
Yeah. So your questioning skills are creating that tension in their mind and basically building a much larger gap. That's really what we're doing, right? Because here's where they're at. If you're watching me on YouTube, you can see my hands here. Here's their current situation or current state. Here's where they want to be. We call that their objective state, or like their future, right? Now, what's the gap? The gap is only determined by your questioning skills. If you don't know how to ask the right questions, if you don't know like Matt talked about, the right tonality, and you trigger sales resistance where they don't open up, well, that gap becomes much smaller. And now that problem doesn't really look that big. And now it kind of looks expensive to buy what you're offering. Now, NEPQ, we're going to teach you how to make that gap so large in their mind, like Matt's talking about. You're creating good tension in their mind. So you're creating that tension in their mind, that gap is so large, so big in their mind that they have to do something about it. Like there's no going back. Like they own the problem now, and they own the solution that they have to solve this. And that's how you can double, triple, quadruple, 10 times what you're doing now as a salesperson or as a business owner trying to scale with your salespeople.
Yeah. Now, I think what the new era is like, because I think the tendency for a lot of people is they see like the neutrality as a weakness. They see it as like you don't push back and challenge. And that's not what it is, because you still need to challenge people, and you still need to, but you do it in a way where you're detached and neutral. Yeah. And it's not personal attacks on people. Yeah. It's questioning a way of thinking.
Yeah, I agree. I think some people, when they first hear about it, they think it's like, oh, do you want to buy? Should we talk again? Like, it's not like that at all. Okay. Your neutral languaging, your unbiased triggers the prospect to become open to you. So when we're teaching companies and salespeople how to set a frame, it's not like, hey, at the end of the call, you can make a decision. It's, we're going to see if it's a good fit for us and if it's a good fit for you. And at the end of the call, you can either say, yes, this is what I'm looking for, or no, what it's not. You don't need to do any think it over, things, is that fair? Because something like that, some type of frame. Well, all that does is it triggers sales resistance the rest of the call, because you've just basically told the prospect they have to make a decision at the end. Now, do you want to make a decision at the end? Of course. Now, it depends on if you're B2B or B2C. There's some differences there. But of course, you want them to make a decision. But you can't tell them in the first 1 minute without any trust or without evoking any emotion or problems from them that at the end they have to make a decision, because that's just going to trigger them to emotionally start to shut down, unless they're like an easy sale. Most people aren't, to emotionally shut down, where they're never really going to open up to your questioning. They're just going to give you one word answers. And then at the end, they're still going to say, I need to think it over.
That's the thing that really got me when I can't remember when it was. I was training with you at some stage, and I think you said to me, it was like, mate, you can't make them do anything. And so I remember like being on this coaching call, and it was with somebody. I was coaching somebody in one of our training sessions, and they were like, no, because if you don't set the frame, I was like, do you think that doing that would change the outcome? I was like, do you really think that saying at the beginning of a conversation, hey, you have to make a decision, will allow them to make a decision? Or are you just going to make a decision for them because you suck at follow-up? I was like, I don't understand. I was like, you have no control. And
they can hang up the phone on you.
They can hang up the phone. They can say, I would really love to do this, but I really do need 36 hours because I have to figure some things out, yada, yada. Like, they might have a genuine logistical. They can say, they can be too scared to move forward. They can say yes. They can say no. They can say there's like an infinite level of possibilities that they can do. And by you pretending to put a binary choice in somebody, it's so ridiculous on the face of it. And that's why I really don't like those frames, is because all it is to me is salespeople giving themselves the illusion of control to make themselves feel better.
Yeah, that's what it is. Because the prospect has full control. I hate to tell everybody listening. Yeah. Prospect has full control. They can hit leave the Zoom chat. They can walk out of the room. They can tell you to shut the door. They can get you out of the boardroom. They can hang up the phone. You literally have no forceful control to make them make a decision. So we want to set a frame, because that decision thing, that frame, just forces most people to emotionally shut down, because the whole time they're thinking, well, I'm not going to open up to this person because they're going to find out my issues and then they're going to make me buy. That's what they're thinking the whole time. Okay. Ask yourself, if somebody did that to you, what would you be thinking? The same damn thing. I remember when a salesperson,
I will give them a think about it just to
yeah.
mess with them if they do that to me.
Yeah. I remember a salesperson did that to me about something several years ago. And I'm sitting here like, okay. Yeah. I'm like, yeah, sure. Let's go. Let's go for it. You know, at the end of the decision, it's a yes or a no, no maybes, no think it overs. It's something crazy like that for like a $5,000 coaching program for real estate or something. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, that was so bad. But anyways, so you want to set a frame that gets them to want to engage. Now, we do talk about setting a frame, and that's in our connecting stages. So we might say, I'll just give you an industry specific example, because, you know, we train too many industries. I don't want to give everybody the whole beans, but let's say if you're a business consultant and you sell some type of training, you come in and you help companies scale. Maybe you fix their operations. Maybe you fix something. I don't know. Let's say you're a business consultant. You're talking to a business owner. So at the beginning of that call, after my first connecting question, let's say they booked on the calendar, I might say, now the first part of this call, James, I would say is really more for us to find out more about kind of what you guys have, I would say, done in the past, and really what you're doing now as far as scaling. And then I would say really what you're looking for, just to make sure we could actually help you. Because there's some companies where there's just not much we can do for them. You know what I mean by that? Yeah. And everybody's like, oh yeah, I know what you mean by that. And instantly the sales pressure is removed, because you're basically saying, I'm not sure if we can help you yet. Because there's some people where there's not much we can do for them. Now, when I say that, automatically, psychologically, what that triggers in the prospect's mind is this: oh, I hope they can help me. That's immediately what they're going to think. And they're going to start the process of starting to pull you in. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's really funny, right? Like, obviously, like I have a similar, like, it's the way that I see it is like, what I want to do is I became obsessed with NEPQ. Like I was telling people about.
Well, that's why you made so much money. Yeah. There you go.
Yeah. I did a training with our 2.0 guys, right? Which I don't do very often, but yeah. And so I was like, they were like, oh, what do I do? I was like, guys, stop. I was like, who here can tell me from top to bottom all the phases of NEPQ, and not only what they are, but why they are there? And no one could do it. And I was like, okay, this is the only thing you should be studying. Stop role playing, stop doing everything. I was like, because if you can figure out Jeremy's thought process as to why everything was stacked in the way that it was, you will see the brilliance. Yeah. And I was like, I had that moment. I was like, oh, this is why it's all the way that it is. And then you can start to unpack, well, yada, yada, yada. Right. But yeah, so what I went really, really deep, but I have a slightly different way of selling than what you do, because I'm a different human. Right. Which makes sense. Yeah. And like, I do the exact same thing, but it's in like 3 words. Hey man, how can I help? Yeah. And that's how I start every call. Hey brother, how can I help? Yeah. And they go this, and I go, okay, like that. And then like we start from there. And then that just, it sets the same thing, but it's just, for me, it's just 2 seconds, right? Yeah. Because like I like to have extremely short sales calls. You know, like I like to do 20-minute sales calls. So I just I've cut out everything. Yeah. It's funny, when I first started NEPQ, I added to the process. Yeah. Right. Because I needed to get better at certain things.
You put in more, a lot of people when they first start, they have to put in more analogies and fluff, because they're learning it. Like they have to put in all these analogies stuff. Yeah.
Now I've taken out everything, everything. I haven't taken out anything, but I've like condensed how many questions I can do each phase in to try and pitch at like minute 12.
Oh, wow. There you go. Now, some industries you can get away with that.
Oh yeah, you can't do it in like B2B and stuff like
that. Others not so much. Sure. It depends on what
specifically what we're selling at the moment.
I want to make sure everybody understands. It depends on if it's an inbound lead compared to an outbound lead.
There's
call. There's obviously some differences that Matt knows for sure.
Also, I want to be very clear. I have a certain level of authority. Yeah, that comes with being the CEO of a business. So if I jump on a sales call, I can lean on that a little bit more, which gives me a little bit of an advantage. So like, I'm not saying that everyone does it my way, and I'm very specific when I'm coaching people that not to do everything my way, because there's a certain level of, je ne sais quoi that I bring.
Yeah, 100%, exactly. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about that. While I think that's Tori, our financial controller. Well, you guys are working early over there in Sydney. The time zone difference, it's crazy. So yeah, I think the old model, if you ever watched that movie, Glenn Ross,
great movie, terrible selling.
I know. Okay, so if you're a salesperson and you're one of our clients, after you've gone through the NEPQ virtual training platform, you've been into our group coaching, go watch Glenn Ross again and see how much you laugh compared to when you first watched it and you were using a lot of those same skills. Have you ever, I watched that after I watched it first when I first got into sales. And I remember watching it maybe 4 or 5 years later. And I just remember like how fun it was almost like watching a Borat movie. It was so freaking funny that I was just falling all over myself. But then I'm like, a regular salesperson might actually think that's cool.
Yeah. It's like when I watch movies about special operations guys.
Yeah. Right.
I'm like, that's not how you do that.
Yeah, exactly. It's completely different.
Yeah,
so
that's the one where he writes up AIDA, but he spells it wrong.
Yeah, AIDA, right? Attention, interest,
desire, action. Yeah,
action or something.
Yeah, he spells it wrong, which is he puts it in the wrong order.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's the Baldwin guy. So attention, interest, desire, action. And then they go out and they're like, coffee's for closers, which is a cool tagline. I mean, that's a great tagline. But he's like, you can, put down the coffee, you got to close and you got to get the
coffee down.
Put that coffee down.
It's so savage. Yeah. It's that, and it's Boiler Room, and it's Wolf of Wall Street, and it's all these things. And what they've done unintentionally is they've lifted the veil of old era selling. And those movies are the reason why it no longer works. Because those were valid. Now, listen, if we would have done NEPQ in the 50s, our families would have generational wealth that you couldn't believe. Right. Right. If we can go back in time. But back in the 1800s, people were selling the Eiffel Tower 7 times because people were just gullible back then. Right. So,
exactly.
Yeah, but and AIDA has been around for a very long time.
Started in 1889 by Sir Elmo Elias Lewis. He actually sold circuses. It was the first known sales process ever written down that we have record.
Yeah,
1889.
It's crazy, and I think all these films and all these things, like they lifted the veil of like, oh, these guys are pieces of shit.
Yeah,
like they are out to get our money, and like that is the vast minority of salespeople.
Yeah, those movies triggered the consumer because that type of stuff happened, right? Like the movies are real. Like that's Boiler Room selling. Those movies, when people watch them, think of you, the salesperson, as one of those people. That's what you're going up against. And when you sound like people that use those type of techniques, assumptive selling, pushy, or repackaged as consultative selling, asking a few questions, then going in logical questions to find out their needs and going into your pitch, you sound like everybody else. And so that's what they think of you. And so they think of you and they view you as just another salesperson who's trying to stuff your solution down their throat. And what do? They commoditize you with all these other salespeople over there, put you in a corner. And if they buy, they're going to try to negotiate and compete on price. That's not where you want to be.
No, exactly. I was having a conversation on DMs with one of our 2.0 guys, and he was saying how he's struggling to adapt a few things. So I was like, "Hey man, I've got some time. Like I'm in the car. Like send me some voice notes, and I'll happily help you out." And he was saying how people are price shopping, and I was like, "Well, people only price shopping because they feel like you don't understand their problem." Yeah. I was like, I'll get 2 to 3 quotes. That's fine, but I don't go with the cheapest or the most expensive. I go with the person who I feel like understands my problems the best, therefore will give me the best solution. Now, listen, if they are the most expensive, I might try and get them to knock it down a little bit so it gets a bit closer to the middle quote, which I think is fair, for something like that. Sure. But I go with the thing that I feel like solves my problem. Yeah. And if that costs me more money, that's fine. And I've been like that even when I was broke. I remember I had to get a new garage door thing years ago and I had no money. And the guy that I went with was the most expensive quote, but he had the fastest. Yeah. He got back to me the fastest. I felt the most amount of nurture from him in terms of a prospect. He was very polite, nice. He provided a good service, and and I was like, oh, well, I'll go with you because you clearly have the best offering.
Yeah, you trusted him. You trusted him by the way he treated you. That even though he was more expensive than anybody else, you felt like he could give you the best result. And because of that, you're willing to pay more. That's why I always say people don't buy based on if they just like you. They buy in our day and age on if they feel like you're going to get them the best result, period. That's why people don't necessarily go down to the local butcher store. They might like Butcher Fred, but they're going to buy that same meat from Amazon because it's just a better service, right? They don't necessarily like Amazon, but they trust Amazon's going to do something better for them than the local butcher down the corner. Like you love grandma, but you're not necessarily going to buy from grandma if she can't get you the result that some other guy can that you don't even know.
Exactly. So yeah, I really think, a lot of these, people are like, oh, in my industry, it's like, well, I had a lady the other day, I was on a training and she does medical device sales.
Yeah.
And she was like, oh, well, this. And I was like, well, what you don't want to get caught in is like, well, in my industry, the sales cycles are 12 months. So I was like, well, what if I told you that we had people doing 3-month sales cycles in the exact same industry? Yeah. Right. And so it's like, well, it's like, you know what I mean? It's just, just because things are done a certain way doesn't mean that it's the correct way to do it. And if you think about things and like I know, like one of our big medical device sales companies that we train, we dramatically shorten their sales cycle because we just removed the fluff.
Yeah. Like they didn't have to keep following up because they knew the right questions to ask with NEPQ that built trust with the doctor or the hospital, the administrator, whoever they're dealing with, that triggered them to build urgency in their mind that they wanted to change their situation and change it now rather than going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. 100%.
Exactly. So, I think, to sum up, the biggest difference between, for me, the old era and the new era is not only the results that you get, but I think for me, it's how much better the life of the sales rep is who is selling in this way. You are detached from the outcome because you realize you cannot make somebody buy. If you cannot determine the outcome, then there is no point being frustrated at the outcome.
Yeah.
Right. Like if I close 50%, and I should be stoked when I make a sale, and I should not be surprised when I don't because it was 50-50. Do you get mad if it's heads or tails? No, you don't. Right. So, it really allowed me as a sales rep to just chill out.
Yeah.
And I realized that I could sign 10 in a row. Yeah. I'm not the greatest salesperson to ever live, but I could also not sign 10 in a row.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm not the worst salesperson to ever live because some people are just never going to buy, even at 90% close rate. There's still 10 that won't. Yeah. You might get those 10 all in a row and then sign the next 90.
Sure.
Right. You still close at that 90% close rate. Right. So like for me, it just allowed me to go, hey, listen, at the end of each call, my goal is to do my process.
Yeah.
And if I do my process, I'm happy.
Yeah. If I follow my sales process, I know that if I talk to 10 people or 15, I'm going to get this end result. Now, depending on the industry, if, like, let's say the average close rate in your industry is 20%, but you're at 5%, then that's a major problem because you don't even want to be average. Like if the average is 20%, you want to be 40%, right? So it depends on your industry. But if you do the process right, you learn NEPQ, which you can learn for, virtual training courses or group coaching, and you follow that sales process, like Mike says, you get predictable results. That's why when companies come to us, I see the biggest problem that companies have is they don't have anything that's predictable. It's like all their salespeople are just out there winging it, and they're spending all this money on advertising or whatever, and they just don't have anything that's predictable. It's like 1 month they're up, the next month they're down. 1 month they're up, the next month they're down. You can't get to where you want to go with that type of business that doesn't have a predictable sales process. Everybody's out winging it.
There's a lot of things you can't do. You can't raise capital, so therefore you probably can't grow. You can't trade sale. You can't IPO. If you want to do any of those three things in your business, you have to have a consistent, predictable growth chart.
Yeah.
Right. And if your salespeople are just winging it, doing like this, that's the biggest leverage point you have in your business right now.
Yeah, 100%. All right. So that concludes. I've got to get out of here. I know you've got meetings and stuff as well. It's 5. It's crazy late here in New York City. Got to get going. Thanks for being on. We will be back shortly as well here in a couple of days with another episode. Now, if you want to learn more how to sell more of your products and services, the first step, if you have not joined our free Facebook group, that's the first step. Just go to www.salesrevolution.group. So go to salesrevolution.group. And right when you join, you'll get a couple of question surveys so we know what industry you're in, what products you actually sell. Just keeps track of who's in our group. There's a group of about 16,000 some salespeople and sales executives and business owners in that group. We just
really ramping up
like crazy. And right when you join, we're going to private message you. So look in your DMs. Either me, Matt, or Marco Cortese, our chief revenue officer, will message you, or somebody in your team will message you.
Free training, maybe.
A free training. I think we sent them the 101, the NEPQ 101 mini course.
A full mini course explaining and breaking down the core values and basics of NEPQ.
Yeah, we give you a list of questions you can use as well for different sales situations in there. That alone will help you sell more. And we go live in that group about 3-4 times a week, different Q&As, different trainings. So go to salesrevolution.group and we will see you on the next episode. Thanks for being on, Matt. Hey guys, if you enjoyed these, here's another you can watch right over here. Join our free Sales Revolution group. Click the link below, join us, and we're going to help you. Thanks for watching. We'll see you real soon.